Yo! JD here, Limitless. And as you can see, we are on F1 2021, but today we're doing a blast from the past. We have decided to actually try the controller because I've seen quite a bit of a debate about this recently. So this video, I'm just going to showcase basically my first attempts of using the controller again after 4 years. That's how long since I moved from the controller full time. Because if you're new to the channel, I played on the controller for about 8 years, about 7 to 8 years fully on the controller. And once I got signed to an F1 esports team, that's when I made the full switch. And a lot of people say that the wheel's faster or the controller's faster, and there's a whole big debate about it. And I just really wanted to give a little bit of my take, and also to show you, really to try and give you a perspective of what you could expect depending on which device you are using, and what I feel is easier and vice versa. But you can see, starting off with this gameplay, we're actually going to be showing 3 separate races. This is the very first one I did, so I didn't warm up or anything at all, racing against a few YouTube members here before we get into the main lobbies. And I think I have a little advantage because I had been on the controller for so many years prior to me. It hasn't completely left my brain just yet, although I did mainly play on the old Xbox controller on the 360, which I actually preferred that controller much more because the thumb sticks here are very, very small and thin in comparison, and I was never a particular fan of that. But you can see, as we're jumping straight in, it's going surprisingly well. And also to note that we are using the fixed setups here, so I didn't allow custom setups because I think they'll be way too oversteery. So I didn't want to have an absolute nightmare using it for the first time. So everyone is using the exact same setup. And Craze ahead of me, a good friend and YouTube member of mine, he's a pretty decent driver himself, so I thought this would also be a good test. And straight away I felt surprisingly quite comfortable. I think starting off with the controller, I think one of the main things I really like about it is that you have a sense of feedback through the throttle and the brake. So with the triggers, so with the throttle and the brake, it's very, very easy to tell when the car is fully gripped up. So when you're coming out of a corner, if you're getting too much rumble, then you know you're getting too much wheel spin. But there's a certain point where you just have a little bit, and over time you'll get used to that feeling, and then that's normally a very good indication that you've actually applied the traction correctly. Because that's one of the things with the wheel at the moment, unless you have some very, very expensive pedals and play on PC, you can't really feel any feedback from the car with the pedals. It's all through the wheel only. And when you're driving a real racing car or a go-kart or something as well, you do get feedback through the pedals as well. And I think that's where the controller is actually very, very beneficial. And also on the brakes as well. As soon as you start locking up, your controller stick or the trigger on the left will start vibrating like crazy. And again, over time, you'll develop that, I guess, muscle memory or finger memory that you will know how much you need to press down for certain corners. And if you feel the vibration is coming on too strong, then you can actually adapt probably even quicker than you do with a pedal itself. So I think with the throttle braking, controller might even win in this department. And with the throttle itself, a lot of people have discussed whether there is an assist built in or not, and I can confirm that there is, because if you just enabled full sensitivity of the triggers, you could be much more accurate with your feet than you are with your fingers in terms of measuring a distance. And that's why there is a slightly built-in traction control that's certainly nothing new if you've played the game for a long time. But there's also a steering input control, which is a plus and a negative with the controller. And what I mean by that is that if you were standing still on the straight with the wheel, you can rotate the wheel as quick as you like. Whatever you do with the wheel in real time, if you're using 360 degrees, or if you're using less, it's going to be even more. But whatever you do with the wheel in the real time will match itself on the screen. Whereas with the controller, if you go sorry, I can't speak today. I'm actually feeling a bit ill at the moment. But if you go from full lock right to full lock left, you will notice it will actually have a little bit of a delay in the steering. So it will actually go back to the center, stay there for a split second, and then it will continue its lock to the other side. And the reason why this is the case is that going through corners such as this, you'll see as we're going into here, we'll pretty much almost do full lock to the right, and the steering wheel isn't going full lock. At higher speeds, the steering input is actually reduced, and that's to help you control the car. Whereas with the wheel, it will turn the amount of lock you do all the time. The slower you go on the pad, and the more complete lock you do, the more sensitive it actually is, and it will allow you to do it. So it fixes itself, which is, for sometimes on some corners, it actually helps you because it stops you from actually turning too much. Whereas sometimes that's the problem with the wheel. Although you have this whole range of flexibility and how much you can actually steer, sometimes it's quite easy to actually turn too much, which causes you to get understeer, heat up your tyres, or just have a negative impact on your lap time. Whereas with the controller, if you actually get the right line, although it's a little bit harder to do, then you could actually have a better speed through the corners and a better approach, and it stops you from basically oversteering or overturning the car. So those are really the pluses with it. Although I would say quite quickly that the wheel is going to be the faster device. It's really simple as that. It just has so many more options to choose from in terms of where you can steer. It's completely down to your input. You're not really reduced. Like coming through into here, you can see there's always that slight delay when you're turning from corner to corner. And once you get a bit more experience with the controller, the actual best strategy is not to go fully lock to its maximum. You actually want to be doing it about 95%, pushing it all the way to the side. Otherwise, it actually makes it a bit slower going from lock to lock. Whereas if you do that 95%, it's much easier to change direction sooner between them. So you can see here a pretty good start. I was actually very, very surprised about taking the W there. So now we're into a full lobby here. And again, one of the benefits I'll say of the controller is definitely the traction once you get used to it. Just having that feedback through your fingers where you don't get that for your feet. So as the lights go out here, we get a pretty reasonable start. But coming through to here, these kind of corners, this is where it's going to be quite tough for the controller. You can see having those multiple stabs at it, whereas with a wheel, you can just be so much smoother with your inputs as well. So we're just going to try and navigate through this traffic as best as we can. And I was actually very, very happy with the pace that we were actually doing right now on this controller. Coming through to here, really controlling the brakes. You can see we can actually trail brake really nicely. Sometimes I think it's because we've been banged around once again, but I think in really heavy braking zones, I think the controller is actually probably the better device in the heavy braking zones. But as you're braking and turning into a corner, as we've just left our DRS or ERS on, haven't noticed that because we have to press the top button as we're about to do it. Going through into here, we still haven't noticed it. Now we do it now. Going into here. But yeah, we're having to take multiple stabs, and in time you will become much, much smoother with the controller if this is the only device that you are using. But again, I think the wheel is always going to be the quicker device. It just has much more range of input that you can do. it allows you to change direction quicker. It allows you to be smoother as well. So when you're going at speed, that means when you're using a very aggressive oversteering setup, which actually has a bit more grip potential, it's going to be easier for you to be smoother with that setup. And that's why in reality that it usually is the quicker device. But not to say you can't be fast with the controller and even reach almost an esports level. Like there's guys like Louis Welch on the PC and PlayStation, probably the fastest controller guy I've ever seen, and he's hanging with the likes of people like Jan Watmir in terms of race pace at least. And I think I did qualify for esports myself in 2018 with the controller, winning the Challengers race that I needed to win. And I think in wet conditions, the controller arguably could be a better device, mainly due to the traction, the braking, the steering input, the traction input, or the traction assist that you do slightly get. Because as I said, if it allowed you to have the full range for steering on the throttle, it'd be next to impossible to control. So whenever you went full lock and it would go full lock itself in the game, someone probably could get used to it, but it's going to be so hard to be consistent with. Hence why you need those kind of assists in terms of the traction and the steering itself. But you can see here we're trying to get a good run up into peak 10 in this race, and we're going side by side with the Red Bull here. Let's see who's going to be first. Let's see how good I could be on the brakes and go around the outside. You can see controlling that trail braking actually really nicely and getting some really good traction on this exit as well, and we've got the move done, so that was pretty nice. But in terms of what I feel is the easier one to learn, I would say the controller is more user-friendly. I think it's easier to get quick with it, initially at least. I think the wheel, despite people driving cars in real life, using a wheel on a racing game is actually a very, very completely different experience in terms of the muscle memory. Even worse if you haven't actually got down the inside here, and yeah, just testing our limits, but a little bit too far there. But yeah, with the devices, I kind of described them as skiing and snowboarding, where they're quite a similar-ish kind of thing. Skiing is actually much easier to learn than snowboarding, but it's harder to master. It's got a whole much more range to it, where snowboarding is a lot harder to learn and get into. But then once you kind of learn the basics, it's actually quite easy to master. Well, a bit easier to master. I don't think anything's easy to master, but I think it's easier to master than the likes of skiing itself. So I would actually describe the wheel as snowboarding. I think for someone who's never used it before and they're jumping on an F1 game, something like that, it's actually going to be a much tougher experience to get up to speed, especially if you've used the pad before as well and you're going from pad to wheel. Don't expect to be matching what you did straight away. Expect to be multiple seconds off, as I'm trying to go around the outside of this guy. Not going to happen. Let's see if we can do the switchback here, which I don't think is going to be the case. But yeah, I think the wheel is typically a bit harder to learn. Even for me, when I first went on the wheel, and I've driven in karting for many, many years, it took me a good few months to 6 months to actually start getting comfortable. But I think once you do get comfortable, you normally reach your potential quite quickly. I know some people are different, where they can drastically improve from year upon year, but in general, I think if you're going to be a good driver at the wheel, you normally start to see that quite early on. Whereas with the controller, I would describe this as skiing itself, where I think it's actually a bit easier to learn, to get into it. I think you could be at quite a good pace quite quickly with the controller, especially once you get used to the steering being smooth, not going full lock to full lock. I think it's actually a bit of an easier experience to have a reasonable pace. I think most people use controllers more than they have done before they go on the wheel. But then in terms of actually mastering it, getting up to an esports level kind of pace, I think that takes many years to do that. And even for myself, when I first started using controller, to get up to a really insanely good pace, or I felt like it was a good pace, definitely took me a year or 2 years to really do that. And my lap times I did a year before were drastically different to what I was doing a year or two later. So those are my kind of thoughts on this. Let me know what you think down below. So yeah, the wheels, like snowboarding, harder to get into, but I think you normally see your potential quite quickly. But I'd say the controller is definitely like skiing, where it's easier to get into, a bit more user-friendly. Weirdly enough, and you wouldn't think that as well. Like I said, most people are driving with the wheel quite a lot if they are driving a car in real life, but it's just nothing like it at all, especially when you're playing the F1 games. It's a very weird experience itself. So yeah, wheel is going to be the fastest device 9 times out of 10. The only game where the controller was actually faster was on 2014, and that was because the controller had so much of a traction assist, it didn't actually burn up its rear tyres, whereas the wheel had no traction assist at all. Although they've both got traction control turned off, they were just wheel spinning so much more, and it was so hard to control, it was actually next to impossible for the wheel drivers to actually keep up. So those are my thoughts on it. We're actually going to continue on for another race as well. So we finished this one coming home in P9. Got the final race here at Bahrain. So we've got 4 lights, 5 lights, and as they go out, trying to get a good start. And let's see what this traction is. And you can see a pretty good launch with that as well. So carry through into here. We're going to decide to choose to go around the outside. And apologies, the camera's not going to be completely in sync because I am on Xbox and usually has a mind of its own when it wants to sync up with my streaming software and get a pretty good start. Absolute carnage here. And what's going to happen? So FLK 8 Craze, good friend of mine, going down the inside, getting a good exit, and we're going to go side by side with this guy going into here. And what on earth was that? People are just very impatient when it comes to online lobbies. And now, if you want to join these lobbies as well, then make sure you click the YouTube join button. I do play on every platform, and when I do a lobby, you will have a priority invite if you are able to join at that time. And thank you very much for people who've been helping me practice for my league races, my YouTube members who I've been doing that with on PC and Xbox as well. Really do appreciate that, and hopefully you learn something from it as well. So coming through into here again, we were getting used to this quite quickly, and it was surprisingly quite fun as well. I don't know what it is, but I just had more feedback going through the throttle and the brake, which is very odd to say. So coming off here, trying to get a good exit. Razagamer leading this race. And also to note, thank you so much to people who have been applying for my one-to-one coaching at www.coachlimitless.com. I do teach people on the controller as well, so if you are interested in that, I do it for all platforms and all input devices. I've just released some new slots for next week as well. We're booked this week, but pretty much next week got all new slots. So if you are interested in that, then sign up to the website, book a session. If you become a YouTube member, you will get a permanent discount as well if you are interested in that. And currently through to what we're going to do, we're going to go down the inside here and a little bit of overkill. Actually, just keep it on the track here. So I was quite happy we did that. But again, like we did at China, just kind of testing the limits to see how much we can push this. And we're going to try and get back on track here using the ERS. And we're still in the top 10 of this race. And it's just going through coolness such as this. You can see we're going almost full lock, but the car isn't doing it on the screen. And again, that's an advantage and a disadvantage of using the controller itself. So we're going to try and get into the back of this guy once again here. Coming through it, he goes very wide, and DRS hasn't been enabled just yet. So we're going to use the ERS here and deciding to turn it off. Just sitting in his slipstream, and are we going to go through move into his turn one? I think the answer is probably going to be no. We're going to see how late we can brake. You can see with the braking input, we actually are able to throttle brake quite nicely with this device. Coming off the exit of this corner, he actually gets the DRS from the car up ahead of him. So we're going to let him go into this corner, trying to get a good exit. It's through corners such as this. When you're turning and going on the throttle, that's where the controller probably struggles the most. It's normally from a dead stop is when it's at its best in terms of getting on the traction. So when the wheel is completely straight. So you can see getting a pretty good exit off this corner as well. I was thinking about the guy down the inside here, but decided to think better of it. Actually been pushed by the guy behind Veloce Dragon, someone else I know quite well. And I think he is on the controller, Italian driver on the controller, good friend of mine too. And yeah, it's just through these corners that where I feel the wheel is going to be better, especially in high speed change of direction. The ability to change that direction quicker without that input delay. Having the wheel to go back to the centre for a split second is definitely going to be one of the main benefits of it. So coming through into this final corner, doing this quite nicely on the traction. Now I'm going to be using ERS again. Do we decide to keep it on? The answer is yes, we do. So we're going to side by side with young Castro 52, but it looks like he's got some good straight on speed. And we're going to try and outbrake him into here. Yes, we are, but we're going to go straight into the back of the McLaren as well, and just about saving the car as Veloce Dragon tries to get that move done, and somehow we have managed to save the car despite being on the controller as well. So I was actually quite happy with the car control here. And for anyone wondering, I don't change any of my calibration or configuration of the controller. I have it completely on default settings as well, and that's how I've always played with the controller. I never made it more sensitive or tried to desensitize it as well. So coming into here, we're out the points at the moment, trying to get some good traction, and we've got quite a lot of ERS to play with, and it's going free way into this corner here. So are we going to try and go on the outside of this guy? But again, we just can't. We really struggle with corners such as this. Coming through into here. If I was on the wheel, I'd probably be diving down the inside now, but we decided to think a little bit better of it. Got plenty of ERS to play with as well. So coming through into this last corner, let's see if we can get a good exit, and we're going to try and get within the points here. So trying to get a good exit, but go a little bit wide on this curb. So using all of the ERS now, using the DRS, and we've got some pretty decent straight on speed. This guy's light is flashing, so we decide to turn it off. And we're going to go down the inside here. Yes, we are going down the inside. So I'm really confident on the brakes. And I was feeling really confident on the brakes of this device. Trying to go side by side here. Managing to do it. Getting on the DRS as we do so as well. And is this going to go try and go around the outside? Yes, he is. So that's not really what I want at this stage. Trying to get on some good traction. And there's no way we're going to go side by side into here. But you can see two guys ahead do have their red lights flashing, so try and go for a little bit of a switchback. This guy goes, trying to go down the inside of him here as well, and using the ERS, and we're still in P11, so we've still got to make up a position if we want to do it. So trying to get really good line on the exit of this corner, get some really good traction as we do that. I know this guy is really low on the ERS as well, so if we could stay close into this last sector, you might have an opportunity. So can we do this well? And we do this pretty well this time. So we're going to try and keep it flat coming through into here, trying to get a really good run on the exit of this corner. Let's see if we can do that using the ERS, and I think we are going to get a run, but there's going to be no room really to overtake. So I'm going to go down the inside into this final corner. He's going around the outside, and yeah, we decided to think a little bit better of that. But yeah, today we used the controller for the first time in 4 years. I just wanted to give you my brief thoughts on it due to experience I have had on it in the past. Thank you so much for the support on the channel. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll be catching you very, very soon. Peace.